Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Monday, June 22nd, 2026, episode 527. I wanna talk about the Thucydides trap, the other Thucydides trap. So back in episode 417, I did go over the Thucydides trap. And I'm just going to read back what I had put in that episode in case you didn't want to go back to that particular one. So, the expression was inspired by the ancient Athenian historian and military commander Thucydides and coined by the American political scientist Graham T. Allison around 2011. So, Thucydides himself didn't come up with it, but the American political scientist did in 2011. Based on an observation by Thucydides in his History of the Peloponnesian War, that it was the rise of Athens and the fear that this instilled in Sparta that made war inevitable. Allison used the term to describe a tendency towards war when a rising power, such as Athens, challenges the status of a ruling power, such as Sparta. Allison explained this significantly in his 2017 book, Destined for War, in which he argued that China and the US are currently on a collision course for war. Though Allison argues in Destined for War that war between a ruling power and a rising power is not inevitable, war may be very difficult to avoid and requires extensive and intensive diplomatic attention and exertion in the case of a Thucydides trap. So basically, the common understanding of Thucydides trap is that you have a situation where you have a dominant power being threatened by a new power. And so war by the old power to try to hold on to whatever power they had is going to happen, right? So a war between the two countries. And episode 417 I had made a year ago before the war in Iran that started in February, started by the United States and Iran. And so I hadn't yet talked about, so I wasn't really, that episode wasn't talking about the Iran war, but had the sense that, yeah, there was a war on the horizon. And it didn't look like it was going to be against China, but against another country. Now, the thing about the other Thucydides trap that I wanted to emphasize was the fact that if you read, and I read for my class uh, in university on justice, power, and human nature. That was the title of. So basically, it was the speeches that were recorded by Thucydides. They were put into a collection of essays, and that's what it was called, On Justice, Power, and Human Nature. The Peloponnesian War um, write, writing is extremely long, and I don't have the interest nor the time to go through it all. And what you see there is this interesting, because it's only looking at the speeches, it's very interesting political dynamic. There's a lot of politicking, in other words. It's not, a lot of people would like to think that more war is more or less a morality issue, but it's not. It's more than that. And when you read on justice, power, and human nature, I try to emphasize the political aspect, how people are making moves for their own benefit, but they have to say different things to get people on board in order to carry out their agenda. And so basically, Corinth, the city of Corinth, which is much smaller than Athens and Sparta in terms of size and power, they have a problem with Athens. And so Corinth was trying to expand their borders, and Athens was preventing that from happening. So Corinth was trying to have vassal city-states under its rule, but of course, Athens at the same time was also expanding and creating allegiances. And so they would come to the aid of cities that Corinth was attacking. And because Corinth was really upset with this, they went to Sparta to try to get Sparta on their side to attack Athens. Because, again, to emphasize, Corinth couldn't do it by itself. And so they needed a larger superpower, Sparta, to help them take down this other superpower, Athens. And so basically, they are talking to Sparta and they're trying to goad them and get them to attack Athens before Athens attacks Sparta. That's what they're saying. Athens is going to attack you eventually. And so why wait for them to attack? Why not just attack them first? In other words, it's a kind of preemptive attack, which Hitler did in World War II with Poland. I know you're going to attack, so I'm going to attack you first, right? And so evil people do this kind of thing. And that should tell you something about Israel and the United States. They're in good company, I suppose, right? But anyway, so you have this situation where they're going back and forth, trying to convince Sparta that they really need to get uh, a war going with Athens because they're a threat. Now, Athens responds. They have some Athenians listening to the Corinthians give their speeches to the Spartans. And so they chime in and they're like, whoa, 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 Athens is only behaving in the same way that Sparta is behaving towards other city states. And so, why do you have a problem with Athens when you do the same? And so they're bringing out that hypocrisy aspect. And so, what it becomes really important is that you emphasize the subjective aspect of it. So you don't see how Athens is basically functioning and behaving much in the same way you are. No, no, no. What they're doing is evil. And don't mistake and don't confuse their behavior with ours because clearly we're better people, right? And that's the kind of vibe that's going on there. Some of the comments that were made against going to war with Athens was that they were warned that they'll leave this war as a legacy to their children. Either the war will drag on to the point that their children will have to fight, and that is what happened. The Peloponnesian War lasted 30 years, and so of course the children had to go fight in the same war. The children had to fight in a war that they had no input. They just had to keep on participating in something that other people had started. And we're going to probably leave this as a legacy to our children. If not the fighting aspect of it, then definitely the debt part of it, right? We borrowed so much money for this, we made our economy so much worse, and so that will be a legacy to our children. Another thing that was raised, complaints can be resolved whether they're from cities or from individuals, but a war engages everyone for the sake of a few personal interests. A war's progress cannot be foreseen, and there is no decent way to end it easily. This is straight out through Thucydides, right? The English translation. So two countries, I don't know, Israel and Iran, they have a complaint with each other. You can resolve them verbally. You do not need to bomb each other, attack each other, or try to murder each other. But once you start a war, now everyone is involved. And we can see because the Strait of Hormuz was shut down, everyone in the entire world is now involved and affected by this war started by the United States and Israel, this war of choice, as everyone loves to emphasize that this war did not have to happen. And as we can see with the so-called peace talks and the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, how hard it is to end it when clearly that is what needs to be done. Yeah, it's just so uh, it's interesting. It reminds me of this sign that I have hanging in the classroom. Don't make me repeat myself, as a quote from history, right? Because people don't learn the lessons of history, and so we keep repeating them. Another aspect of another line from Thucydides chapter 2, it says, war depends on finance, right? So if you fight, all those weapons, they cost money. You have to pay all of the people who are going to fight. You have to pay for all of the fuel. You have to pay for the weapons. It goes on and on and on. Um, and so because of this, this guy, Archidamus, he uh, he basically says, because war depends on finance, he says, collect the money first to see if we can even afford this war. And no, and I mentioned this before, that war depends on taxes. And so if you're going to have a war, you got to collect taxes, you got to raise taxes. And whenever you do that, people get really upset and they're not going to support a war. And so Archidamus, knowing this, he says, yeah, let's see if we can afford it. And we can't afford it. We can't afford it today. There's no money. And then the Corinthians are chastising the Spartans, saying that they're too slow, right? They think too much. And so he responds by saying, yes, we are slow and make delays. That is their biggest complaint about us, but don't be ashamed of that. This slowness of ours is really nothing but clear-headed self-control. It is this that gives us our unique ability to restrain our arrogance in success, right? And of course, that's why you go slow. And this rush to war that we had back in February and other times is indicative of arrogance, unrestrained arrogance. And I don't think anyone can argue against that. Um, so then he goes on to say, there are ready to go. They are ready to go. They are ready to go to arbitration, right? To talk about this. And in such a case, it is not lawful to attack them first. Sound familiar? I talked about this before in a sermon, I believe. Perfidy, right? Where you raise the flag of truce, you say, let's talk, and then you attack them. America did that twice, right? In the last year. They did it twice. They killed the negotiators, for crying out loud. I mean, it's just so over the top ridiculous. America is so in the wrong, and for listening to Israel, because of this. And you might want to talk about the history. I don't care, because all of it is subjective. Of course, if you want the war, if you want certain things to happen, then you're going to pick a side and you're only going to cherry pick the information that's going to justify your opinion. And the reality of it is, whatever happened, the actions that were taken in February are criminal. They are war crimes. And because of that, it doesn't matter. Nothing else matters. The behavior that they are engaged in now is illegal. So, just as Corinth got Sparta to get into this war, which ultimately led to the collapse of that Peloponnesian sort of time period, right? And allowed other countries to come in and conquer them. Um, you see this today. It's a lot of people are saying this is the end of the American empire, right? This is the end. And if America goes, what happens to Israel? Obviously, they are in a lot of trouble. You know, the craziest thing, and I've said this before, that the biggest anti-Semitic behavior is this war, because it puts everyone in Israel in jeopardy. Um, if the United States uh, falls into economic problems like it is now because the oil is running out, then what happens to Israel? They'll be just left hung out to dry. Uh, I don't understand why people can't see that. I don't understand why all the warmongers and the neocons and the blindly loyal to Israel types, why they can't see that this is a serious danger to them. And that I don't really care who believes what. It doesn't matter to me. What matters is the consequence, the choices that were made based on whatever justification people have, because I have to live in that world of consequence. Uh, Although my opinions didn't matter, no one listened to me, no one cared what I thought. I now have to be put through the same situation as everybody else who wanted this stupid war. And that's what Israel did. Israel um, played the role of Corinth, uh, got the fear going, said the things that were needed in order to get the United States to go all in on this action. All right. So uh, it just boggles the mind how people have become so ignorant of history, have become so blind to their own morality, right? Just because they think they're right, then everyone else is automatically wrong. Doesn't matter what information you present to them, which is why I don't really care uh, what the justification is for the war. If you want to fight the war, go fight. I'm not going to stop you. I heard they're hurting for soldiers over in Israel. So go join up and fight, right? And you'll understand why this is just a really bad idea. And I said also back a year ago in episode 417 that the United States hasn't won anything in a very, very long time. And I've heard people talk about some of the conflicts in a favorable way, and I think they're looking at it from various lenses, whether it's diplomatically or whatever. But in my opinion, the United States hasn't won a conflict in a long, long time, you know. Uh, and that's because we're living in the aftermath. And a lot of the governments that the United States set up are falling apart, which means that it was not successful in the long term. Whatever it is that they thought they did, what they claimed they did, yeah, it's not true. They couldn't even beat the Houthis in Yemen. These are people who are supposed to be backwards, no modern technology, and the United States couldn't defeat them. Instead, they lost a lot of equipment and they expended a lot of expensive munitions, and they still didn't walk away with a victory. That should have been the clear signal that going after Iran will be a huge mistake. And there it is. And we are living in that reality that it was truly a horrible, horrible decision that was made. So most people, as I said before, most people who follow this war, they pick a side. They picked a side. I don't care. Uh, it's not my problem. It's not the problem of the United States. It is not. It's a war of choice. That's what they mean. We didn't have to get involved in this. And if anyone, and I'll repeat, if anyone really believes strongly about the war, whether they should fight or not, yeah, go. Just go and fight. And if you don't, you're chicken, right? You're a chicken and you want other people to fight your fight for you. And because other people are dying, other people are getting injured and maimed, blinded, crippled, you don't care. And that's the problem. You know, people who want the war should have to go over there. And if they're too old to go, they should send family members over there, right? And I don't want to see my own children be forced to go over there for something which none of us care about. The United States is in trouble we are in serious trouble. And if you only look in terms of munitions or number of warships and bombs dropped or whatever, then maybe you're oblivious to it. But there are other things happening in the world, in the United States, that has been kept in the dark, that's been hidden from sight, and those things are coming to the surface. All right, and engaging in war only benefits authoritarians because they have all these plans to increase their control over the population here in the United States, particularly through finance and banking. None of this is good. And because of that greater problem that's lurking over the horizon, because of things like this war, I am fundamentally opposed to any of this violence. And people keep asking me, why? And I'm like, I'm anti-war. Because war, as such, war in and of itself, conducted in this way, is always going to be the worst option that you can exercise, unless you were attacked first. And that's not what happened here. It was a war of choice. And so, therefore, it's the worst choice that could have been made. There are infinite number of choices that could have been chosen instead of this. That would have been much, much better. But here we are. And so this is the other Thucydides trap, where a weaker country needs another more powerful country to back it so that it can start the war that it wanted to, that it couldn't do by itself. And so it had to sucker in another unthinking, arrogant country to come and help it carry out its selfish plans. And here we are. So that's it for this episode. I will talk to you tomorrow, hopefully with a happier topic. Talk to you then.